Okay, let's dive right in. We're talking about a conflict that shaped two civilizations, a holy war that raged for 200 years over a single city. But at its heart, this is really the story of two men, two enemies bound by faith and duty who would come to define an entire era.
So picture this. It's the year 1191, under the blistering Middle Eastern sun. Two legendary leaders are facing off. On one side, you have Richard the Lionheart, the celebrated warrior king of England leading the armies of Christendom. And on the other, you have Saladin the Great Sultan, who had finally united the Muslim world. Their goal? The same thing, absolute control of Jerusalem.
Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. While they're locked in this incredibly brutal holy war, something totally unexpected starts to happen. They develop this profound and documented mutual respect for one another. It's a paradox, and it gets right to the very heart of what makes this whole story so compelling.
I mean, check this out. When Richard is practically dying from a fever, Saladin sends his own personal doctor to treat him, along with fresh fruit and snow from the mountains to cool him down. Later, when Richard's horse is killed right under him in the heat of battle, Saladin sends him two brand new war horses as a replacement. This bizarre relationship, this mix of chivalry and absolute brutality, it just perfectly captures the incredibly complex story of the Crusades.
So to understand how we even got to this point, we need to rewind the clock. We've got to go back almost 100 years, because this all began not with respect, but with a call to arms that literally set the world on fire and left a legacy of blood that would take centuries to wash away.
For over 400 years, Jerusalem was under Muslim rule. And honestly, for most of that time, it was pretty stable. Christian pilgrims were generally allowed to visit their holy sites. But then, in the late 11th century, a new power rises, the Seljuk Turks. They were, well, a lot more aggressive. They started harassing pilgrims and threatening the neighboring Christian Byzantine Empire. And that's when the emperor sent a desperate plea for help to the Pope in Rome.
And boy, did the Pope answer. At the Council of Clermont in 1095, Pope Urban II delivered what might be one of the most effective speeches in all of history. He told the knights of Europe to stop fighting each other and march east to reclaim the Holy Land, and he made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Anyone who took up the cross would have all their sins forgiven. The crowd's response was a roar that echoed across Europe. Deus vult, God wills it.
So after a grueling, brutal 3-year campaign across thousands of miles, the exhausted but fanatical soldiers of the First Crusade finally reached their goal. On July 15, 1099, they broke through the ancient walls of Jerusalem.
What happened next was a hoarder show. A Christian chronicler who was actually there wrote about it. His words, they say it all. The Crusaders, believing they were carrying out God's will, just unleashed a citywide massacre of every Muslim and Jewish man, woman, and child they could find.
The scale of the killing was just unimaginable. This slaughter created this deep, bitter wound, a memory that would fester for generations. And it set the stage for a powerful Muslim response. They would not forget.
You see, at the time, the Muslim world was totally fractured, full of infighting. But the shock and the sheer brutality of the First Crusade created this desperate need for a leader, someone who could unite them against these foreign invaders.
And that leader was Salah ad-Din, who we know today as Saladin. He was a brilliant strategist, a devout Muslim, and incredibly patient. Piece by piece, he built a unified empire that slowly and methodically surrounded the Crusader kingdoms, and his ultimate goal was crystal clear: take back Jerusalem.
88 years after Jerusalem first fell to the Crusaders, Saladin got his chance. At the Battle of Hattin, he brilliantly lured the main Crusader army into a waterless desert, surrounded them, and completely wiped them out. Just like that, the path to Jerusalem was wide open.
But here's the crucial part, the thing that defines his legacy: how he took the city. Instead of ordering a bloody assault, he offered terms. He remembered the massacre of 1099, and he deliberately chose a different path: mercy. He spared the city, protected the Christian holy sites, and allowed the citizens to ransom themselves for their freedom. The contrast with what happened before couldn't be more stark.
Of course, the news that Jerusalem had fallen again sent absolute shockwaves through Europe. A new crusade was immediately called the Third Crusade, and it was to be led by Europe's most famous and feared warrior king, Richard the Lionheart of England.
When Richard arrived in the Holy Land, he was like a force of nature. He immediately proved he was Saladin's equal on the battlefield.
He conquered the key port city of Acre, he routed Saladin's army at the Battle of Arsuf, but Jerusalem itself, the ultimate prize, always remained just out of his grasp.
After years of this back-and-forth campaigning, both armies were just spent. The two great leaders had fought each other to a complete standstill, so they did something remarkable. They negotiated. The Treaty of Jaffa was a compromise. Jerusalem would stay under Muslim control, but, and this was huge, unarmed Christian pilgrims would be guaranteed safe access to their holy sites. And now for the craziest fact of this whole story. After all the battles, all the negotiations, and all these incredible gestures of mutual respect, these two great rivals, who had so profoundly shaped each other's lives and destinies, never once met face to face. Not once.
Saladin would die just a few months after the treaty was signed. Richard would die a few years later on his journey back home. But the legacy of their conflict, and of the Crusades as a whole, it echoes to this very day.
The 200 years of crusading were, in the end, a military failure for Europe. They never permanently held Jerusalem, but unintentionally, they kick-started massive changes. Yes, they deepened religious hostility, but they also opened up new trade routes and led to this incredible exchange of knowledge, technology, and ideas that would fundamentally reshape the West.
And you can still hear these echoes all around us. The language and symbols of the Crusades. The very word crusade, the heroic figure of Saladin, they're still brought up in modern conflicts. It's a powerful, and sometimes scary, reminder of just how deep these historical scars really run.
So while it's easy for us to get fascinated by the legends of chivalrous enemies and noble warriors, historians like Stephen Runciman are there to give us a crucial reality check. For all the romance, this was a 200-year war that caused immense, unimaginable tragedy and destruction.
And that really leaves us with this, doesn't it? This strange, distant relationship between Richard and Saladin. Two men fighting a holy war, yet somehow still capable of recognizing the humanity in their enemy. It poses a powerful and pretty urgent question for our own divided times.